Hi, everybody, and welcome to the House Salt live show. This is our live show that was September, but in like news, Paige moved to London, and there was a lot of other stuff that happened. So we just kind of combined September and October. And so this is finally the live show for Dragonfall by L.R. Lamb. Hello, I'm Marines. My name is Marines. You are on my channel right now, which is also a first for House Salt. Just all kinds of things. A little unusual this month. And I gave this, I think, 3.5 out of 5 stars. I don't know. I'm between 4 and 3.5. I think by the end, we'll see. So hi.
I'm Kayla. I'm K-Trees on TikTok, and I also gave this 3.5 stars. I really enjoy dragons in general. I'm trash for them, so I really enjoyed it overall, but I had some issues. So
yeah.
I'm Jordan from the Jordan Journals, and I thought it was okay. I don't really have any strong feelings towards it one way or the other. Maybe it'll change at the end, but I don't have any strong feelings about it.
Sure.
I'm Connor. My channel is just Connor O'Brien, just my name. This was my pick. I'm finishing it today. But I am at like a 3.5 right now.
Hi everyone, I'm Paige from Minimal Bookie, and I think this is like at a 3 right now for me. We'll see if the discussion changes things, but I have questions, comments, and concerns.
There. Before we jump into it, I will say that at the end of this live show, we will be picking our next 2 books. So we skipped a month this because of the whole September, October. So we have 2 books left. We'll pick a November and a December. And some people, we won't name by name, don't have any ideas or in case they get picked. So if you have suggestions or ideas for what books we could read in November or December, you can start adding them to chat. So we can, as we're discussing, we can look at these suggestions and get a little bit of inspiration. So that said, we will jump into the discussion about Dragonfall. And I think that we should start with characters. So this is a multi-POV fantasy. Our 2 main characters, I would say, though, are Arcady and Everin. So how did everybody feel about Arcady?
I really liked her. Like, I felt like she was the more fleshed out of the 2, if that makes sense for me. Like, you understood what she was, like, why she was trying. She had, like, motivation for everything that she was doing. Everin, for the most part, was just, like, it was fun and cheesy from the beginning. His voice was not for me. I found he was a little overdramatic, especially toward the end. But yeah, I was telling my roommate, because I was reading it obviously today, and she was just watching me binge read this book, and I was like, I never really enjoy the perspective of like the creature who is like all knowing, all like powerful, who is the obvious. Like, I always prefer reading from the perspective of someone who has to try a little bit harder to figure things out, who is the less powered person in the situation. So I think that's probably why I leaned more towards Arcady than Everin.
I actually liked Everin better at first because Arcady was just a bunch of world building thrown at you, and like you were pretty lost for the first like 25% of the book, I would say, even afterwards a little bit. But we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, I kind of agree with Paige, but I did like Everin more than that. So
I agree.
I think
Everin was
just like thrown into. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I was listening to an audiobook and I didn't even realize that we had another person thrown in there until I was like, this is a female's voice, I think, but it's not Arcady because this isn't happening in her like section of the book. But yeah, I felt like Arcady was kind of hard initially for me to follow because there is like so much world building happening with her and there's so much like just things that you have to learn about the world. But I can see where Paige is coming from because I feel like that all-knowing character is also like the character that typically withholds all the information from you. And it's like, I know this, but I'm not going to share it. And I know this, but I'm not going to tell you either. And it just feels a little like tiring after a
while. So somebody mentioned here, Arcady is gender fluid. And they say basically in the book that they will go by any pronoun. So she, her, he, him, they, them is acceptable. So they are gender. That's another thing that a few chapters in, I was reading and I was like, what gender are they? Because I think the audio, for those of us who did audiobook narration, I think the audiobook narrator is female. And so, but I was like, no, I don't think that this is right. So I actually looked it up. And then later on in the book, they actually address it when they're talking about pronouns. And Arcady says that they go back.
And the signs that they use to.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that maybe should have come a little bit earlier in the book.
Yeah, yes. But I mean, it's there enough that I was like, no, I think that this person is non-binary. And so I looked it up, but they do kind of address it right away. So I with Arcade, with both of them, I feel like it was one of those books where I felt for the situations and I felt for the like bond between them, but like each of them as characters, I didn't have a huge sense of. It wasn't like I was like, oh, my new favorite character. Mm-hmm. I can tell you all about this character because I can't. I don't really know much about them except for like their motivations for the situations that we are following, and that's kind of it. So it read a little bit flat to me in that regard, but I will say that I'm a sucker for fish out of water stories and like the grumpy dragon character. And he wasn't like, he was grumpy dragon, but there was something soft about him too and very angsty. He was having all of these big emotions. You're having so many emotions. So I enjoyed that perspective.
Yeah, and the same. I also enjoyed the fish out of water, so I was kind of enjoying. What is his name? Everin.
Yeah.
But I kind of agree with Paige that Arcady was more. I don't know. To me, I felt more fleshed out. But during the course of the story, I would find myself like being like really into one character, and then it would flip during a different section of the story, and then it would flip back, and I'd be like, okay, I don't want their perspective on this series of events, but then I would appreciate it later. So I was kind of all over the place.
Yeah. I will also say that I am not an enemies to lovers girly, which I'm sure I have said at some other during our book club. But I think even though one of my big complaints about this is actually the pacing of the story and the plot overall, I think the pacing of their relationship was so much better than what you usually get with enemies to lovers, where it's like from the beginning they're like, I hate you, but ooh, I love you.
It's like it's like the faded bonded characters.
Yes, but they still had tension. They didn't trust each other. They didn't like each other. And even when it was like some thawing, like they would dance together or something, then they would be like, oh, this is weird. And like, so that like tension, I think worked really well. And so overall, I liked their relationship together. What did you guys think about like the two of them together?
I'm a big fan of the enemies to lovers, but like specifically when they're like these bonded or faded enemies to lovers, it's like one of my favorite things to read. So I was really enjoying their relationship and their dynamic.
I mean, I'm also a huge fan of enemies to lovers, and I thought the tension really worked well here. Like I felt the tension, so it was like really good.
Yeah, I will say the descriptions of like them like describing each other and like how hot and heavy they were for each other. 10 out of 10. Those are great. Loved that. Those are really well written. Yeah. I do think like at the end, the intensity of the emotions all at once, I was like, that was a little bit much for me, especially him. But again, I think it's just because he's an overdramatic baby, and I'm like, sir, calm the fuck down. Chill out.
There was so much angst.
It was the best, like the most well-written parts of the book were like the angst in the middle.
Yeah.
Where they were describing like, oh my God, the whole thing where like if they touch, they hurt each other, but they can't help but touch each other. That's so beautiful.
Isn't it only one of them that's hurt though? It's just him.
Yeah. Or him. No, it's her, isn't it? That she. Oh, is it him? The way I don't remember anything of this book at this point.
I think Arcady like sucks the magic out of him every time they touch him.
So good. And so he was like, I'm gonna kiss you anyway. And I was like, yay, do it. Kayla, you mentioned before, you touched on it, but the third point of view that we get is Soren the assassin. But her point of view chapters are sprinkled in. You get like 1 or 2 per part. To the point that I also like clocked it immediately when we got the point of view. And then after a while of listening, I was like, wait a second, I haven't heard from this person in a while. And I had to go check the chapters and see like it was coming up, because I really felt like, did I make that up? But what did you guys think overall about Soren and her points of view?
I noticed that like Soren had a chapter per section until the very end, and then it was like almost a lot of Soren.
Yeah.
So I didn't really understand the jump there, I guess because of the climax was happening. But I kind of liked her story only because Soren and Magnus reminded me of Falco and Jinx from Arcane, their like relationship a little bit. Because it was very villainy, obviously. But that's like all the really big thoughts I had on it, because we didn't get a lot of it. So I don't know. I see that she's conflicted. I think that she might like have a redemption arc kind of thing going forward, but we'll see. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that was like I don't know about like if we needed those point of view chapters. I feel like at the end you kind of get the connection between that all, but I don't know. Did we need them?
Yeah, I feel like
would you have had the like connection to Magnus and his storyline without her? Because that ends up being like the big thing. So like, how else would we have seen that character?
I know. I feel like was there a better way to like incorporate?
Yeah, incorporate Magnus. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So like, I feel like a lot of like the other tertiary characters that we get perspectives from always felt like jammed in just to like give us a little bit of information. So it was like strategically done versus like in a way that made the characters interesting. Because I do agree that the Soren chapters just felt like I enjoyed the idea of her, like, and the idea of like the the mercenary who's secretly like a missionary. Like, I love the idea of it, but the end where she's trying to decide if she wants to stay or go, I didn't understand the conflict there for her.
Like, it might have been better if she was like maybe part of the band of thieves, and then like at the end it revealed that it was like her all along or something.
Maybe she was like double crossing them or something the entire time. Yeah, that would have been cool. Why are we always trying to rewrite it?
Yeah. I also say that something I think that doesn't help is this has 3 different writing perspectives. So we get told Arcadie's point of view in the first person, Soren's point of view in the third person, and Evren's point of view in the second person. Mm-hmm. And I think because Soren is already so removed from the action, and you get so few of her chapters, and it's third person.
Yeah.
You even get like in her head. I feel like that point of view just like was dangling out here, like super unconnected until the end. And I was not a fan. I actually was a fan of the second person in the sense that it made it so much angstier for him.
Oh my God.
It caught me off guard the first time that he said you, and I was like, oh, he's talking to me. And I'm like, this is a little ominous. I'm a little scared now.
For most of this, I was like, why are we even doing this? Like, what's the point? But then it does come home at the end when you realize he's like writing these letters or writing this down. So I was like, okay, I like it overall.
Well, yeah, and its second person is such a weird and not much used perspective. Mm-hmm. So during the whole thing, I was like, why are we getting this second person? Like, there's got to be a reason. So it was satisfying that there actually was a good reason.
Yes, I agree.
I'm curious about the second book to see if the second person continues from his perspective. I liked it because it made it very easy to tell whose like head you were in, between either of them. Because sometimes, like, say I was like doing one thing and I was not paying attention, and then I would hear you and I'd be like, okay, we're in everyone's head. It's his side of the story, and I really enjoyed that element of it for sure.
Yeah, I think ultimately. Go ahead.
I've never read a book where there's like a whole section or whole chapters told from the that perspective. I've only read books where it's like 1 or 2 pages like sprinkled in every so often where they're talking directly to the reader. So I thought that was like just a cool experience because I've never read a book like that before.
The only time I ever remember is the 5th season, like does it really well.
And Kate Jemison loves to do
that.
the last book that I read that had the second was Harrow the Ninth.
Oh, okay, my friend is obsessed with that series, and for the second person reason, yeah.
So yeah. And I think that was another reason that I was reading this. I was like, "What are you doing?" And then okay, you get a pass.
Yeah, I've only read it in like mystery thrillers where they're talking to like somebody in a letter, or like they're stalking people or whatever. So it was really cool to see it in a setting that wasn't a mystery thriller.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm kind of like jumping all over the place here, but whatever. So we talked about the relationship, the main relationship, but would you categorize this as a romantasy?
No, it just, there wasn't an, okay, for me, romantasy is, me getting into it now, romantasy is where the romance is first, the fantasy is second. This was fantasy first, romance second, so it can't be a romantasy. There was one sex scene.
Yeah, there's too much world building in this.
There's too much.
Like romantasies don't have that much world building.
It was like romantasy of that name.
What?
Okay, would you say it's a fantasy romance instead of a romance fantasy?
I would say it's a fantasy with a romantic plot, because their romance wasn't the core part of the book. Like, yes, their relationship, their bond is, but not necessarily a romantic. It could have been platonic and still been the same story.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Why? Are you coming up with theories in your head now?
No, just like reading it, especially through the middle, I was like, oh, we're like focusing a lot on their relationship. I think this comes around to like what I wanted to actually ask about next, which is the pacing of the whole thing. Like when we're like languishing in the middle, because I do think that it sags a bit. I was like, I get why she's like teaching him how to like steal things and dance and all of that, but it just felt like so focused on their bond and their relationship. It was like, would you call this a romantasy or a fantasy romance? And the other thing that got me thinking about it was that this book was released, I think, the same day as, or like really close to, Fourth Wing. And when I was looking on Goodreads at reviews or whatever, this has like a 3.5 star on Goodreads, which is low for Goodreads. And a lot of people didn't like it, but a lot of my friends who loved Fourth Wing read this like soon after and hated this. So I don't know. That's what just got me thinking about, is this for the romantasy girlies? Is it not? And I asked my Discord, and like a few people said yes, they would say this was romantasy, and a few people said not. So that's where that all came from.
I think there's just too much, like we said, like world building, like all that magic stuff on the side, like just like the politics of it all. We can talk about like the humans pushing the dragons out of their home into another world. Like there's just like so many little details that I feel like romantasy, in the sense that publishing is trying to like publish right now and like get cash grabs, is less like world building heavy.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not like super in tune with the TikTok book thing. I know romantasy is like a big thing for them, but I feel like that probably stemmed from like the Sarah J. Maas of it all. And I don't think that this is the same as that. And I've read both of them now. And I wouldn't say that like, if you liked that, then you should read this necessarily.
Yeah.
Because I feel like most people read that not because of the world building or like the setting or whatever. It's the characters and their romances. Which I don't know
if we're not reading for the characters here.
No, I don't think this has enough like driving characters for that.
Okay.
I get why though that people are like, oh, this is like a romance, because it's a big portion of the book. Like it's not the main portion, but I would say that this is like more heavily romance than most like just regular fantasy that's being published.
And it's got politics, and it's got this other like whole plot of like, okay, the dragons are coming back, and this bond like will either open the world or what. But that's kind of like, I don't know, the world is like intricate enough, but the plot is just that the dragons want to come back. It's not like it's like hugely complicated, the plot. The real, I don't know, plot core here to me is this bond and what happens to this bond, and is Everin gonna like kill her in the end, or like any of those things. Like, I don't know, I feel like that came off stronger. And my biggest complaint with romantasy is that it wants to be romance, and it just like over all the world building stuff. You're also a fantasy, and you're not paying attention at all to anything. And this felt like it paid attention to the fantasy aspects, but the like romantic relationship was still a focus. I don't know if it was enough of a focus, to be like, yes, fully this is romantasy. But I feel like it gets the balance more right than most romantasies.
Maybe this is what romantasy should be,
be,
but because I've seen the rest of it,
I think
the ideal idea of a romantasy, like because I do really like romance and I do really like fantasy. So when the pairing is like the right level of balance between the both, that's like this, like that's like a good, just a good book in general to me. And I don't think of myself as like a romantasy reader because I don't want to read just a romance within a semi-fantasy
but this
world.
is like
I guess it also would like depend on what the next books do. Like how much does it sway to either side of it?
And ultimately, if
I think that would like
ends with a happily ever after, because I feel like it has to in order to really be like romantasy.
Oh, the dragons and humans are going to live happily ever after together.
Yeah.
They're going to coexist.
Because that's
like
what they originally started off as, right?
They started off as like bonded together, and then
they would fight the like demons. Or
the
whatever.
demons. Exactly. There we go. That's what we're getting back to.
Wow. So it's like
you don't even have to read the other books now.
It's just going right back to where they started.
I do think that, like, in general, to just keep this tangent going, that, like, I think of like romantasy and fantasy romance as like a scale, and here you have romance forward with like fantasy elements, and over here you have like fantasy forward with romantic elements, and like you get books that like land anywhere on that scale. So something like Sarah J. Maas to me is like romance led with fantasy elements, where this I would say is fantasy led with more romantic elements. But I don't know, that can all fall under the umbrella of fantasy romance or romance.
Like there's definitely plot and like things happening in the Sarah J. Maas books. There's like a whole like thing that's happening, but she really
face.
I know. I've read all of them. Okay, there are things that happen in them.
I promise.
I promise there's a plot. But I won't disagree and say that like her romances are what people read it for. It's not reading it for the plot.
Okay. Backtracking. How do you guys feel about the pacing? Did you have the same experience as me where like the beginning was a little bit of a challenge and then I got into it and then it was like a drag in the middle and then the end was just like boom, 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 boom.
Exactly.
Yep. That's the perfect way to describe it.
I fell asleep probably like 4 to 5 times in the first 100 pages.
Oh my God.
And I had to keep going back.
Well, and the beginning is such an info dump. Like it's like
boom.
Yeah,
it was hard to follow it.
And I was trying to like concentrate at like 9 p.m. and I was like, my brain is off. And then I got into it, and then I agree with Mari. It kind of like dips in the second, like in the middle portion, and then at the end it goes crazy again.
Yeah, that's actually what I would find the hardest about like recommending this book is that it's like one of those that you're like, okay, the first 100 pages, and then you're like, and then it gets slow in the middle, but the end, like, that's not like a really resounding sort of recommendation.
It doesn't have like a good steady build.
Yes, and it didn't feel like it.
And at one point, I thought it was building up to this elaborate heist, and I was like so excited. I'm like, yes. And then we get there, and it's like 2 chapters long, and I was like, okay.
I thought so too. Like, this is a heist book.
That's why it was like, oh, okay, we're training for a heist, but really what we were doing is just training for angst and touching.
No heist.
I was like, oh, okay, that's what we need to focus on. But the pacing makes it like hard to recommend.
I feel like the poker scene needed to be much earlier. Because they just like, she's like, I need to touch him so that I can steal his face. It's like, okay, yeah, but you've been saying that for like 100 pages. So like, get to it.
Yeah. The world building in the beginning, I struggled a little bit because at first I was like, I think I really enjoy this. Because I do enjoy world building that kind of goes action. So she was like breaking into the tomb and telling us things as she went a little bit about like the world. But then it just like tipped into telling us too many things about the world as she went, and so it almost got to like the world building that I prefer, that is a little bit more like tell as you go, but it didn't get the balance right overall. Like there was a moment in the tomb that was like, girl, pay attention, you're about to like steal something, like what do you do what you got to do. So yeah, that was a little tough.
Did anyone else have a hard time like picturing like a time period because of the language that was being used too? Like, I don't know, sometimes it felt so modern to me. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe it's just me.
Everin had more of like a ye old cadence to his voice, but Arcady, I actually, I don't know that I paid attention to it, but I think that Arcady does have maybe something a little bit more modern.
Yeah.
There is a point where she makes a comment on when he uses contractions. And she's, oh my
yeah,
gosh,
that he doesn't
uses
talk
a
in them
contraction.
normally. Yeah, because he's talking to someone in them.
Yeah. So she does have more like casual speech than he does.
World building. What did you guys think about world building, the religion, the whole aspect of like humans kicked the dragons out, and then like so many years later they're like, oh, the dragons are gods, and the dragons are like, F you.
I thought there was a lot of it, and yet I was still confused.
Yeah, that's the perfect way to describe it. That's literally, it's like there were so many cool details, but then I could not picture, like you're asking about if we pictured, I didn't picture anything.
I didn't picture anything.
I didn't, blank.
Kind of blank.
Yeah, the most descriptive language again was around like the feelings and the angst. But like, and I know that Everin has red hair, and I know
and green eyes,
and Arcady has the like markings on their body,
and she has blue eyes.
And blue eyes, but I, other than that, like descriptions of like the settings and things, it wasn't very vivid to me.
So their dragons are almost like Thor from Marvel, like this person that you thought that used to be here and like exists in this world, and then you're like, oh my gosh, they're gods, and then they just show up one day. It's like we're not actually mystical creatures, we exist.
I thought, it was kind of cool that like they talk about like rewriting history, and like every single group of people has done that multiple times in this same book. So it was kind of cool to see how that progressed, and like, okay, they did this bad thing, kicked out the dragons, and then changed history so that they wouldn't have to think about it and wouldn't have to like, I don't know, acknowledge it.
I mean, there was a lot of smart like social commentary in here too.
Yeah. I wondered, like, with this, like the specific culture we're in for most of the book, from Arcady's perspective, how much of that was Magnus also being like, dragons are gods, y'all. We should be. Like, I was wondering. I was like, it's such a big reveal. I was like,
huh. Do we know? Did Magnus and Everin overlap in the like dragon world?
No, they didn't.
They didn't. Okay,
Not
so
at all.
And they were like 300 years apart or something like that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that there was a lot of cool commentary. Yeah, man, it's one of these books that I like appreciate what it was attempting, even though it didn't like land all the time. For instance, with like Everin and Magnus, and the whole idea that like a male is born every so often. And so like Arcady and Everin talk a lot about like how, like, I don't know, basically toxic masculinity and like the violence of males or whatnot. But then you have this like male dragon who is like the only of its kind. And he's also this big like soft boy with all these angsty feelings. And also he's supposed to like usher in this war. And so like having all of those conflicting feelings, I thought was really interesting. And then this idea of like, yeah, the humans were totally wrong to kick the dragons out, and like, but then the dragons are gonna come and like exterminate them. And like also that's super complicated. So like, how do you deal with that? Like all of that stuff I thought was really interesting, but I don't know that it was always delivered like in the best way, or like the thought was like fully completed.
I think especially with the dragons specifically, like in like theoretically you understand the anger of them being like, they pushed us out into this like really tiny like horrible place, but it was just like it felt like there was a little bit of depth missing there in terms of like, so I usually like when some like you can understand and empathize with the character even though they're making the horrible choice of like, I'm gonna raise everything. Normally if I'm like, I kind of get why you want to do that, but this time I was like, no, like there was no like, I get why you want to do that in terms of an emotional like empathy included versus just like the logical being like, I get why this is your retaliation to the situation.
Because we get Everin's sister's point of view a couple times too. But we don't really have an anchor on the dragon side of somebody who's like thinking about like, we need to reclaim our home or anything like that. We're getting it mostly through Everin, and what he's saying is like, oh, but I wanna.
Or someone who's like actively there in experiencing the bad conditions of living.
Yeah, like seeing the bad conditions. Because for the most part, he was like, yeah, it's a little dry and hot, but we made it through.
There's no food. There's no water.
Beautiful.
But it's fine.
All right, and I think so that brings us probably to the end. Specifically, I want to know how you guys felt about like the reveal about Magnus, or anything else that we haven't touched on yet.
I love her. Like, I love the reveals in this book. Specifically, I was thinking of the first, like the little reveal that we get that Arcadie's grandpa is the guy that brought the plague to everyone. Like that little mini reveal. I was like, oh, that's a good way of like revealing that to us within, like you said, like dropping breadcrumbs as we're getting the actual plot of the book as well. And I really like the Magnus reveal. I was like, he's a dragon. That's cool. And then I was like, oh, he's that dragon. Sick. Cool. And that made me actually want to pick up the next book. I was like, and then I was like, oh, but I wonder what he's going to do next and how that plays into everything.
I really like the end in general. Not even like the end, but like the last half of the book. I thought that it like picked up the pace a lot. And because the Soren chapters were like hanging out over here doing nothing, like that final reveal I thought was cool. The final reveal of like Everin writing these letters or whatnot, I thought really brought it back to. So I was cracking up actually because there's an epigraph at the beginning and it's talking about the person who basically translated the firsthand accounts to make up this book. And then he also says that he uses scrying and telepathy or something, yes, to like fill in the gaps. And then he goes, and everything else I just kind of made up because official accounts are boring. It's like bringing it back to like, oh, duh, this whole time this was a first-hand account because the epigraph told us was really funny. And it also made me laugh because in Fourth Wing, there's like a little epigraph like that like that somebody is translated all of this. But like they translated, like there's like sex scenes and things like that. So like who wrote this? Who and is this like Violet's Diary where it's like, and then he touched me. And the official scribe is like translating this for the history. It's like a huge thing in Fourth Wing. And I thought that the way that this actually addressed it, and it was like, and I made some things up for funsies that was actually pretty cute. But anyways, the point was that I really liked that at the end that we got that this was a note thing as well.
I feel like the reveal that he was a dragon wasn't like it like happens and you're like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It kind of explains all of like his eccentricities and his powers and like everything else that he can do. He's a dragon.
I think also because like the claw was like his claw, wasn't it? That they were all like that. I think it was that specific part where he was like, I have 4 fingers. I was like, the claw is yours.
I was thinking about it like maybe halfway through that he could be a dragon, but I didn't realize it was the last nail.
Well, and she sprinkled. Oh, good.
No, go ahead. I was going to ask.
And the author was sprinkling in like, oh, I made it through. Has anyone else come through?
Yeah. I definitely expected more.
Yeah.
There's probably definitely more dragons than we even know of that are going to be out there for sure.
Did we ever get anything with the part of his wing that got clipped off?
Way to remember that. So I can't.
Oh, okay. So when they're doing
like faces on all of us,
when they were stealing the claw, Soren throws her like dagger at him and cuts the very tip of the like part of his wing.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. Reminds me that I wanted to ask you guys about do you think Arcadie was like lying about they were having dreams about Everin the entire time, and he discovers that and is like, you were lying to me. But then we jump into Arcadie's point of view and basically they're like, I was just having these dreams. Like, I don't I read it. But do you think that there was more intentionality there? Did I miss something? Or do you think that this is kind of like left up in the air for us?
I think that they just were like bonded the entire time without knowing. Like they just saw into like now Everin's dreaming about what Arcadie's doing. Yeah. So I feel like it was just like you saw one way and it was the bond that had always been there and that's what it was always fated to happen the way it was happening.
Weird because I felt like if Arcadie was having all these dreams, then they should have recognized him. Yeah. Especially if they're drawing
he was a dragon.
Well,
they were
yes,
dragging
that's
him in
true.
dragon form. Yeah.
But it's also kind of like I feel like the dreams would have been brought up.
Yeah, the
sooner.
fact that the dreams weren't brought, that's what got me, was like, why is this coming up out
Or
of
even when
nowhere?
like he was revealed to be a dragon,
Yeah.
like the thing that said,
Yeah, she should have been.
masters.
Yeah.
Like, should have noticed that you look familiar, and I've been drawing pictures of you
Yeah.
for a while.
Or like, I don't know. I felt like, or like, maybe they did draw their dreams earlier in the book. I just don't really recall that being a thing that they did every day. So I thought that was weird.
This reminds me, I have a question.
Yeah.
Does Everin have 2 forms or 3 forms?
3.
3 forms. Okay. It's the dragon, a human form, and then
Some
Well,
sort of
but-
this monster.
like
Yeah.
half between half hybrid.
I think that half hybrid thing was mostly because he couldn't fully turn into his dragon form, right? Like that was part of the bond, is that he couldn't fully access.
Actually,
I
now
would say 3.
I think it's 2.
Well, yeah, like he couldn't like shapeshift, so he like
What was
shapeshifted to look more human, which was
It
like
was like a
technically-
Pieter form, whatever that. I don't know.
Yeah, so,
So
that
that
was like
was-
where he looks kind of like a snake, basically, like not like a
Yeah.
snake, but like a snake
Like a
person.
sneaky human. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That was the
like
first form that he
Voldemort
shifted
when
into,
he
right?
It
I
reminded
was
me.
picturing Voldemort when he mentioned the nose, when he was like, "I gotta make my nose bigger."
Okay.
That was the first form that he shifted into, and then later in the book, he was able to fully shift into a human.
Once the bond was
yeah.
completed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It reminded
And
me
then-
of the like Books of Rexar series by Martha Wells, where they have like their like full on form and then also
So could she also shapeshift?
Yes. Well,
Yes.
You can
yeah,
shapeshift.
No.
you can take on other people's shape.
Yeah, like
Face.
Okay.
yeah, but not
Okay.
like across like
Species.
species.
No,
That's the
she
word I
could
was
just-
looking for.
Just could like shapeshift into other humans.
Yeah.
yeah, and they had
Okay.
to do it
After
with an
touching.
active spell. Like it's
Yeah.
like I think he had 2 forms that were like permanent forms
Yes.
that you didn't have to actively be casting a
Thinking,
spell
yeah,
for. Yeah.
Is anyone still
Okay.
confused about the plague and how it worked at
Yes,
all?
a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, I have no
Yeah.
idea.
That wasn't fully. I think that's something we might get further on in terms of like how it impacts
true.
the and there because there was like the plague, right? And then there's also like this thing where like if you use
Yeah.
too much
Definitely,
magic,
if her grandpa was
you become a
involved.
starveling or whatever. And I think the plague is like an idea of like becoming a starveling because you can become one faster if you have
It
if you've been
weakens you or
struck.
something.
Yeah, like it affects the way you can do magic. Basically, is the only thing I understand.
Well,
about it.
And I think if her grandpa is the reason that the plague happened, like that would be silly not to bring back in another book.
Yes.
Especially because they have it. Like Arcady is struck.
And
As
plus,
we
they,
see when
they
they got
reference
the-
that like the red water means that like the plague might come happen again or something like that too.
Yeah.
At the end.
So I mean, we're talking a lot about book 2. So I don't know. Maybe this is like a silly question at this point, but would you guys finish like reading in the series? Would you read book 2?
I feel like I would if someone else wanted to read it and we read it together. I don't know if I would like get to it quickly enough of my own volition. And then like when it gets too far between books, I just never pick up the next one.
The Magnus reveal at the end means much of what we thought we knew about the world was wrong. Magnus was on the side with the humans working to keep the dragons locked out.
But I don't know if Magnus is trying to keep the dragons locked out because he wants to protect the humans as much as he doesn't want. Like there's something like
Like he wants to be in power, like being the only dragon.
Well, and
No.
he saw all these things that were about him, and he probably has a horrible end, and he's trying to run from it.
yeah, like I think he's trying to control the future in a
Like
way
it's
that,
a more selfish thing.
Yeah, I
don't
would
think-
love it if Magnus is just shady as hell. And he's like, those dragons like treated me so bad. And
And I locked them all away.
so you can't come here. All right.
he can be the only god, correct.
Yeah.
Magnus is goat.
Yeah.
Magnus, he's Highlander. There can only be one.
Well, would there be another villain if it wasn't Magnus? Is it going to be another dragon? Like
Well, the
from
mom
Dragonland?
kind of is.
The mom?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we
And then
think
those
she's
evil
the ultimate
creatures.
villain?
I mean,
I
I
mean,
think
these
she
kinds
wants
of
to
books-
commit genocide.
Okay. That would be an ultimate villain. That's pretty bad.
Say something about that. Like that's usually the villain, but again, the fantasy girlies, that's usually the love interest. So
God.
I just know that books like this love to start with one villain, and then it's not actually the true problem.
yeah, I feel like
Of
this
the
one is
world.
probably more on the line of like, who is the villain? Like,
Yeah, it's like everyone's wrong in some way.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any other thoughts? I'm gonna let Sam in here.
You wanted to see.
Oh,
if
hey.
Okay.
That sounds wild, guys.
You
Oh,
missed
right.
the
I
time,
was
Sam.
like,
You missed
Time
it.
travel? Is there, like, what is that? How many? Anyway, now I'm like, so
Any other thoughts on Dragonfall, which does actually sound wild when you talk about it? Paige, we'll read book 2 together.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
I'll
Okay.
do it
I'll
too.
read it.
Yeah, I'll read it.
Okay, we'll buddy read this off. We won't do a live show.
Paige is like members only.
Other people are welcome to join us.
Amazing, we did it!
Yay!
So Sam is here because we're going to end this live show by picking the next 2 books for November and December. I still have the little pieces of paper with everybody's name on it. I love doing this. I'm so excited. Usually we were Team Jordan for a long,
No, don't pick Jordan. Jordan doesn't have a book.
Jordan's not Team Jordan anymore. Jordan's anti.
Yeah, don't take my direction. So we'll see what the
It'd be
fate.
so funny if both were Jordan.
No,
It is
don't do that.
Kayla.
Ooh.
I didn't have one prepared, but I do have 2 in mind. One is When Women Were Dragons, if you ever heard of that book.
Yeah,
And
I
then
have.
the other book is The Lightning Thief, because the TV show airs in December. And
I'm so down for that.
I would
so
totally read
down
that.
for that. Yes.
Look at Sam's face.
Sam, I'm sorry.
I would
You got
100%
it.
read
You got
that.
that's a bad time with Percy Jackson. I just won't listen to the audiobook. It'll be
Yeah,
fine. I'll read the
yeah.
normal book.
All right, I'll do
Is
The
the
audiobook was my
bad?
problem.
Oh,
The
yeah,
audiobooks are bad.
It's really
The
bad.
audiobooks
they're
are
old.
very bad. Well, it's bad, and they're read for kids, so his voice is like grating to the ears because he's reading it for a child.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I'm not a child.
as a child, I would appreciate that because I love when they do the
Absolutely.
voices.
Like it should be done that way. It makes my skin crawl. So
Oh, there's a graphic novel. That's it. Okay.
Is that what we're doing? I read Percy Jackson as an adult, like in my mid 20s or late 20s or something, and I was like, that was a book. So I'll reread it, but I don't know that I'm gonna have like a bunch of feelings.
Okay,
about
let's
it.
do When Women Were Dragons instead.
I don't know, but everybody else was super excited. Is everybody
Let's
excited?
take
to
a
read
vote. Take a vote between you 5. I don't care.
I mean, I haven't read it, so yeah.
When does the TV show come out?
December. I think December.
Oh, so we could even do like both of them in 1 month and compare it to give us more content.
in December?
Well, to be fair, we
at a
also,
time.
guys, we can't forget Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes comes out in like,
don't.
and we have to do a live show for that.
We
We
have to.
promised
We
a
have to.
live show, and I
We
have to
did.
be all
We
about
did
this.
say we would.
So
Don't say that.
we're doing a live show for that.
That's a separate live show.
Yes, that's a bonus. That's
It is
because
a
we
bonus.
skipped
A
a month.
bonus.
That is the
a
bonus for us skipping.
punishment.
Okay,
That is a
Sweeney
punishment
says
live
Percy
show.
Jackson.
We're all gonna be
going
watching
to-
it anyway.
Let's go.
All right, Percy Jackson. It
Okay,
is.
cool.
I like Percy Jackson, so I'll read
I
it
do
again.
too.
Connor's
Oh,
like, yeah.
Connor's like, I'm like, Connor will be
I've got
happy.
3 different copies somewhere. Oh wait, here.
All right, here we go. Next
Bye,
one.
Sam.
If it's Kayla again, we'll just read When Women Were
Yeah.
Dragons.
Sorted.
And we've got oh buddy, it's Marinette.
Oh, yes, I'm actually very excited for this. What are we reading, Maddie?
I
God.
also have 2. I don't even remember the Blood Trials by Annie Davenport.
Okay.
Just won an award, and so at the Ignite Awards. And Hench, who the author is escaping me right now, but it's like following villains. Basically, it's like nobody has heard about this. Hench.
No.
Oh my God,
No,
yes,
I
that's the
mean,
one that Hannah she works for the agency that reps the author in Canada.
Natalie
And-
Zena
Yeah.
Weld.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
yeah, I haven't gone around to reading that
I got
either. but-
recommended this book a million times because I did that 1-star review of Assistant to the Villain,
Mhm.
and everybody was like, "Hench did it better. Hench did it
Oh,
better."
I think I've seen this before.
Yeah, let's do Hench for sure. I have been meaning to read it and I've only heard really good things about it. So it won a bunch of like Canadian specific awards.
Okay, it says millennial office politics.
Yeah, it's literally like if it was like if your villain's assistant was an office worker, basically is the energy.
Sweetie is picking all of our.
Nicole's choosing for us.
There's the author. All right, so Hench is my pick then.
Okay.
Yay!
Hench November, Percy Jackson December.
Yeah.
That would be an easy book to read around the holidays because it's short.
It's so short.
Yes, it is short. And then if because I think it actually comes out this TV show late December though, right?
Yeah. Plus it's week to week, I think, so it's not really.
But you can at least you can watch like an episode of it.
An episode.
So we could do that and potentially like watch an episode.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If we felt passionate. What's it on? What streaming
Disney.
service?
Disney Plus.
Disney. Okay. Yeah. I was like, what do I have to
help me.
As long as it's
got
better
kicked.
than the movie.
I got kicked off my family's Netflix, so I'm like, oh
wow.
Oh
sad
no.
I got caught.
Michaela's Disney Plus until they boot me. So
Yeah.
And then also, so we've got November Hench, December Percy Jackson. We'll talk about one episode of Percy Jackson at least. We've got a bonus live show for
Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes.
Ages like
The content's gonna be juicy.
And
we're all gonna see it. We might as well talk.
I did see the trailer for the first time last weekend.
Oh, it looks better than the book, but that's not saying much.
Yeah, we were sitting in the theater, and I was like, "Oh, this is it."
It's been because we read it so long ago, and we read it early enough after release that like a lot of feelings weren't out yet.
Yeah,
and maybe also because now I'm like fully on TikTok, but like. People don't hate it. Like we hate it.
No, people don't hate it. And it makes me very fucking concerned when I see people are like, it's surprising how sympathetic he is. And I'm like, anyway, I'm not getting into it again.
If they don't leave that cabbage line, they need to leave the cabbage line in. And if they don't, I'm going to
Oh my God, the cabbage line.
That has to that's stuck in my brain and everyone else needs to have it stuck in theirs.
I'm going to have to rewatch our live show to really like get the anger.
Get the anger going.
Yeah. I was gonna say also for our December live show, Sam, you're coming with the stats.
I'm coming with the stats, baby.
All right, we'll do our end of the year look back, and we'll talk about our year of reading. And I think that'll be interesting to compare to the last few years of reading because we've had highs and lows this year. Whereas, like, I feel like before we were just having lows.
Yes, all the lows.
We had highs and lows, so that will be interesting to look back on the year. Anything else?
And then at the December live show, we'll pick the first 3 books for next year.
Yes.
My hatred is largely
accurate.
The same thing that we saw with Hunger Games when everybody was like doing a makeup line and blah blah, and it was like you guys missed the point of the Hunger Games so bad. Is seeing people like I don't know, memify President Snow on TikTok.
The yesification
of President Snow.
Yes,
I've seen thirst this already. Like
same. The day the first teaser trailer came out, there was a thirst trap, and I was like, I can't be out here doing this, y'all.
In this political climate,
like it's not too hard as it is. Don't make it worse.
Hard pass.
Right.
That's
I think that's it. We will see you. I know we're very bad at this, but we will try to announce on our social medias time and date for the next one. It will probably, again, just have to be earlier since Paige is in London now. So we're working around different time zones. But we'll let you guys know. It will be towards the end of November. No. We'll let you know time and date. I hope so. I was writing a thesis called.
That's what we're calling the live show. The live show is going to be called The Yassification of President Snow.
Yeah. Somebody's at the very least to do a video essay on YouTube.
Yes.
And it could be 2 hours long and I would eat it up.
Yes.
All right. Thanks for joining us this month. We will see you guys next month. Bye.
Bye.